Oh, right, on with the next project. It's my granddad's birthday coming up, and something he requested from me a while ago was a pocket knife, a folding knife. And now I've made two knives, neither of which were pocket knives. I feel confident I can do this. So I'm going to base it on my little opinel. I've got two of these. Let's zoom in a bit down here. For those who don't know, opinels are French knives, and they're quite cheap, but they're really nicely made, and they hold a really good edge. They're carbon steel, as you can see, rather than stainless, and they fold away and then open up, and they've got this locking ring here, which is great. A number 10 and a number 7, which presumably refers to the centimeters in length of the blade. Anyway, so this 3-inch opinel again holds a really good edge, and it's got that locking bit. Strangely enough, that locking ring, by my reading of the law, makes it illegal to carry it in the UK, because that's now a locking blade, which seems really daft to me, because a non-locking blade is what I carried when I was a kid, and that's what caused this V-shaped scar here when I was stupidly trying to open a plastic bottle, and the knife just slipped like that, and then it closed on my finger. And the reason I have a scar is because I was too scared to tell my dad. I had a massive cut in my finger until the next day. Anyway, that's by the by. So I'm going to try and replicate something like this. We'll see if I can manage the locking ring or not. If I can, it would be a good thing to do, I think. I don't think my granddad's going to get stopped by the police anytime soon, so having a locking ring would be advantageous. Drawn out roughly what I want to do. Instead of the olive wood that's originally on here, I'm going to use a bit of yew, because I've got all this yew wood which I've had sat in the hedge for about 10 years. I pulled it out, and it's still, some of it still viable. Lots of this yew wood is really spongy like this, but I cut off a load of this spongy rotten sapwood and got down to some of the nice pink hardwood and the heartwood in the middle, and that's reasonably dry inside. So not only has it survived, but it's actually managed to season quite a bit. So I'm hoping if I make the handle out of this, it won't shrink too much. But it's got a lovely colour to it, and yeah, I think it'll make some nice handles there. I've measured here the maximum thickness is of the handle, and I'm going to turn it to size in the lathe. And by turning it in the lathe, obviously I'll have it round rather than oval, which this is. But what I'll be able to do is to turn it to the maximum size there, and I'll also be able to turn down this bit where I'm going to put a ring which will hold the blade in place. I found this bit of scrap steel tube, which I think is an axle off a sack truck or something like that. Anyway, it's going to be ideal as the inner ring, which you might be able to see there. So the inner ring is what holds the blade on, and it's got a pin through it, which is what makes the pivot. That pin, I'm going to use some of this, which I think is just a bit of mild steel. So a bit of 4mm mild steel rod will make the pin in the middle. And then for the blade material, I've still got a few pieces of circular saw blade that I've used on the other two knives that I've made. Right, let's get to it. You can see here, this is a lump of the yew wood, and I was using it for seating around the campfire on top of my hill. And it's been there so long that it's not only gone rotten at the top, but it's actually sprouted grass. So all this sapwood is just rotted away. but the inner wood, whatever it's called, the heartwood I suppose, it's got some really nice colours going on. So I'm going to split a few handles just in case the first one goes wrong. And yeah, I'll need a backup. So I'm going to put this is the splitting throw that I made in a different video. I'm going to put that on the split that's formed already. A little collection there. And this lot's, well, I was going to say firewood, it's more like compost. I'm going to do a few more, partly for practice and partly to have some spares in case I cock up this one. There we go, a whole bunch of blanks. So time to turn the turned pieces into oval pieces. I think what I'll do is get this roughly to shape by whittling it, and then I'll go over to the belt sander and even it all up. So I might as well do a couple more of the handles as well, just to have some spares. It's good fun turning these, and I must say the speed of turning them increased dramatically. So by the time I got to number 5 or whatever it was, I think I did it in about quarter the time of the first one. Right, let's try sanding these on the belt sander then. There's nothing particularly special about using a belt sander for this. It's not even a very special belt sander. It just speeds up the process. If I didn't have a belt sander, I'd use a sanding disc on an angle grinder, and if I didn't have that, then I'd use a rasp, or I could just whittle these handles out of the wood. Yew wood is toxic in some way. The berries of yew are not toxic, but the seeds are, if I recall correctly. I'm presuming there's some toxicity in the wood, and therefore in the wood dust, and getting that dust in your lungs is probably not a good idea. It's probably not a good idea anyway with wood. So yeah, long story short, I'm just trying to feel my way really and see what I want, what shape I want to emerge out of the wood. So I'm basing it on the Opinel, but I'm not trying to copy it. I mean, there's no point actually copying an Opinel. You might as well just buy one. This is my own interpretation, as it were. It occurred to me I need a dip in there so that when the blade is folded away, you can actually get to it. One thing I've learned from my blacksmithing is that you need to, form has to look intentional. So for instance, a gate, you don't have to make a gate square, but if you're going to make it not square, it has to be obviously not square, if you see what I mean. Otherwise it's just going to look wrong. So here it was looking a bit wishy-washy before, and now I think it just looks a bit bolder, if you like. So with the next one I can aim straight at that shape from the start. And I think that comes across, it just looks better. Back to woodworking corner then, and box of sandpaper. So at some point I've got to cut a slot in there for the blade. So my initial thought was to use a chop saw, but apart from trying to clamp that, the chop saw blade is just too wide, it's wider than that. Well, I'll figure something out. Okay, up to 500 grit now. This is the last one. And of course with sanding, you're always trying to remove the marks from the previous sanding. Just like when I started with 80 grit, I was trying to remove the marks from the belt sander. And then with the 120 grit, I was removing the 80 grit and so on and so forth. And by the time you get to 500, you should be practically polishing it. So I'm trying to establish a centre line here. I'm thinking I want the slot slightly wider than this saw blade, so that should give me a bit of wiggle room. I wonder if I can mill it out with a drill bit. It's really not doing much at the end there. Right, 2mm drill bit. If I do it again, I might make a tool to do this, like a tiny hook chisel, I suppose. I'll scrape that out. Yes, that's going to work. So next then we need to get a hole through this in this little bit of steel. Right then, so let's get that out of the way. So we've got a handle with a slot cut in it, and then we've got a piece of steel also with a slot cut in it, and a hole for the rod, and that way around. That can be persuaded on there now. That looks like it's in with a shot, doesn't it? So far so good. So we've got a bit of steel on there, it looks fairly convincing. And I've cut the slot in it, and I should have sanded it after that because I've made some marks from rough handling where I've held it in the vise to cut the slot out, but never mind, I'll just have to sand it again. Next stage then is to make the blade. So I've got some circular saw blade here left over from the previous knife jobs. I'm going to try and forge as much of the blade as possible. So you should be able to see here it's got a fairly stout spine. It's got some distal taper, which means it tapers down towards the end this way. And of course it's got a taper coming down here towards the edge. So I think normal procedure would be to cut off a piece of this saw blade material and then just grind it to shape. I'm going to try and forge it just because I don't like grinding very much, it's really boring. So I'm going to have a go at forging it down and see how far I get with the hammers before I have to start grinding. It might be a dreadful mistake because it might mean that I end up with hammer marks in the blade that I then, by the time I've ground them out, I don't have any blade left. So I may actually be setting myself back with that. Hopefully I'll be more precise with the hammering and than that, and it'll all go well. And it'll actually save me some grinding rather than putting in extra grinding. Anyway, the first thing to do then is I'm going to put my bit of circular saw blade in the forge and anneal it, because I've found that annealing these bits of saw blade makes it easier to cut. Even if you're using an angle grinder, it's easier to work with once it's been softened. I'm going to use a gas forge for this, which might just look like a pile of bricks. That's because it is a pile of bricks. That's literally all that you see before you there. The clever bit goes on top, and it's this burner here. I don't know what colour is coming out on the camera, but that's a nice healthy orange to me. And the magnet no longer sticks. That'll do us for that. So I'll just let them cool down on those hot bricks, and that'll soften them up enough to do the next bit. I've said before in other videos, this is not full annealing. I could make it even softer if I was to bury it and let it cool down even slower, but this would do for what we're trying to get on with here. So they've cooled down now enough to touch, and I'm thinking about how to cut out the blade, how I'm going to do it. I think what I'm going to do is to take this rivet out, that's the pivot point in the opinel here, and then use this as a pattern. And what I'll do is trace around this and then cut out to these dimensions, and then I'll forge in the bevels and this bit of taper here, and then I'll reprofile it to get it back to this shape. I think that's the way to go, and because I'm actually going to be moving a tiny bit of metal to get these bevels in here and get that taper down. So it's not like I've got to really allow for that. Anyway, that's what I'm going to try. There we go. Whew. Of course I'll be able to rebuild the opinel when I'm done, so it's not ruined it at all. Basically getting a few seconds of forging, and then the rest is just planishing, making it nice and smooth. Anyway, you should be able to see there, something is happening. We're getting the right tapers. So I think often the difference between experience and inexperience is efficiency. It's not the end result. I'll get there because I know what I'm looking for, so I'm confident I'll get the quality will be there in the end, but my lack of experience at bladesmithing is showing in the umpteen heats and hammer blows that it takes to get where I want to be. But nonetheless, what I'm trying to say is, even if you are inexperienced, you can still get there. It's just going to take a little bit longer, that's all. So I'll bring those back up to orange hot again, and then I'll shut off the forge and let them cool down, and that'll just help to normalise it a little bit. Then I'm going to go on with, I shall profile it, do some rough grinding, and I'll normalise it again, and then I'll go on to the heat treat. Once I've heat treated it, so hardened it and tempered it, then I'll do the final grind to it. So they're just coming up to orange now, and then I'll shut the forge off. Right, they've obviously cooled down enough to handle, because I'm handling them. So again, I'm thinking while I'm at it, I might as well do a bunch of them, and then that way the best of them, the best knife that I end up with will be Grandad's. And I might even have one for myself. Okay. Looking a bit more like knife blades now. Okay, what I'm going to do now then is heat treat these. So just like before, I'm going to bring them up to bright orange, non-magnetic, but this time I'll chuck them in the olive oil. which if you saw the last video, you'll know tends to do that in the cold. That oil was nowhere near as bad as it was last time. It's actually quite liquid now. So if I've got that right, I've turned a piece of metal into a knife blade. Well, almost. I need to temper it yet. Let's give it a file test then. Yeah. Splendid. Well, that's a relief. They're all hardened. 4 blades. I don't know why I got 4 blades. I'm only supposed to be doing 1 knife, but it's always good to have a spare or 3. So they're now hardened, but they're very brittle. So I'm going to put those in to the kitchen oven, which is convenient because I'm going to have dinner as well. And I'll put them in that gas mark 9. So I'm going to do it quite a high temperature tempering, because knives I want to have a bit of flexibility. And I did that with the kitchen knife and it came out a treat. So gas mark 9 for a couple of hours, let it cool right down, and then do that again. I'll do that at least twice, see how we get on. So that'll temper it, and then be a case of putting an edge on it and final fitting to the handles. So yeah, all in all, it's going rather well. Famous last words. Right, that's enough for today. 2 sessions then at gas mark 9. Each time I took it up to temperature for a couple of hours and then let it cool down. You might be able to see a slight purpley tinge to it, and that indicates it's got up to the temperature that I was after. So I did this exactly the same treatment on the kitchen knife, which was made of exactly the same material, the same circular saw blade, and that's worked a treat. It's not only held an edge really well, but it's also flexible. So it's just the right tempering. So I've done exactly the same treatment on these. I'm quite happy with the way the profiles have come out. I've managed to get the little curve there that's on the original Opinel blade, and the slight clip point as well. And so it's got quite a pleasing shape to it, I think. Yeah, those 2 are the best ones. I think that's the best handle. So we've got the best handle and the best blade. Now we've got to try and introduce them to each other, and hopefully they'll get on. So what I'm intending is for this notch to lock out against this bit of pipe. So it should go like that. So that's what I'm after, for it to sit in there, and then the knife can't go back this way anymore. So using the belt sander, although the belt sander is removing material, it's hard to get a square corner using the belt sander, whereas with a square file that would have been easy peasy. But of course the file won't touch it now because it's been hardened and tempered. So yeah, for the future I'll do that the other way around, but we're getting there still. Yeah, that's actually getting there. So believe it or not, it actually feels quite safe holding it like that. I'm working on this tiny bit of slack belt behind the wheel here, so between the wheel and the platen. This belt sander I've got turns quite slowly, I think, because this is actually designed for woodworking, not for metalwork, and I think it runs slower. It certainly runs a lot slower than the linishes that I used to use at work. but that's getting to where I want it, so that's great. So that's 120 grit. Now it's a case of just working up the grits, and I'll go up 200 something, 320 I think I've got, and I'll work all the way up to 600, and then we should have an edge on it by then. This is 320 grit, and what I'm finding is working quite well for me. I'm doing it with the edge down now because it's getting sharp and I don't want it to catch in the belt. So I'm doing it edge down. I'm doing it on that tiny bit of slack belt between the roller and the platen, and I'm gently pushing it in until it's flat with hardly any pressure at all, and then I'm pulling it this way, rolling it like that until I can see a 2mm gap down the spine, and then gently pulling it off like that, and that puts the curve in there, and that's coming to an edge now. So that's working quite well for me. But again, I emphasize, don't take my word for anything here, because I'm not a bladesmith. This is literally my third ever knife. Right, let's fit it to the handle. Yeah, it's quite nerve-wracking stuff. This is why I have lots of handles, because by the time I've cut in there to accommodate the blade, there's hardly any wood left here on this little bit. I'll say now, the bit I've missed out is that little slot for your nail. I have to say, I never actually use that slot, because whenever I do, it tends to just pull my nail back. So yeah, I always personally pinch the blade and pull it out. So like on this big up now, I just grab the blade there and pull it out. But it was, yeah, I did think I'd put one in, but because I don't have a little tiny cutting wheel or a Dremel thingy, I was going to punch something in there, but I completely forgot. So maybe next time. I think I might have left the spine a bit thick, actually, thinking about it. It would have been ideal for a knife this size. It would have been perfect. My original intention was to make a knife this size, but Grandad specifically wanted one that size, so that's what he's going to get. Right, I've had a bit more fettling, and that's just about right now. This offcut of copper pipe, I think it'll work. I'm going to cut a new bit. This bit's a bit rough, but that would lock it. So this is the stuff I'm using. It's just old offcut of plumbing pipe, and if you cut it with proper pipe cutters like these, you get a really nice square cut. Right, I'm going to use the bandsaw and put a slice in there. Cut a slot with that. Open it up with a screwdriver. Right, so a few seconds in the sander and you should be able to see that's sanded that edge down. Let's clean it up with something. Well, it's only copper, so I can clean it up with a knife. Right, I've just carefully on the belt sander taken all the corners off just to smooth it off. Okay, so we go from closed to open. It can't overextend because of the steel tube. And then if we turn the chromed copper one, that now can't shut. And funnily enough, that makes it now not legal to carry in the UK. But if you take this bit off, suddenly it's legal. Daft. Right, let's put the proper pin in there, pin that over, and then it's just a case of tidying it up, I think. I don't want to flatten this like a proper rivet, it would then be too tight. I just want to dink up the ends a little bit so that it doesn't slide through. So it's over to the anvil. Right, let's see what we can do. That's it. It has got an edge, but I'm going to sharpen it, and what I'm going to use is this sharpening system. Right, that's getting properly sharp now. So I just need to emphasize that what I'm doing here is putting an initial edge on it. So when you're actually sharpening something, you're not putting an initial edge, you're getting it back to whatever it was. So if I put the initial edge on at 20 degrees, in future, when I come to sharpen this blade, it'll just be a matter of a few strokes, and then it'll be, that edge will be re-established. Yeah, hopefully that's showing up. Good, call that sharp. I want to put beeswax on the blade, so I might as well put beeswax everywhere on this one. Cool, look at that. Right, I've come outside to catch the last of the sunlight of the day. That is my folding pocket knife, pen knife, as my present for Grandad on his 89th birthday. That's what he wanted. So it just shows you don't really have to know what you're doing in order to do something. I encourage everyone out there to have a go. Why not? Admittedly, I used some power tools in making this, but if I hadn't had the power tools, I would have still have done it. I'd have just done it slower. And if I'd known what I was doing, I would have done it quicker. And so, yeah, if I do another one of these, and I know a bit more of what I'm doing, and I'm using my power tools, obviously I shall go like lightning. But nonetheless, the point I'm trying to make is even if I had just hand tools, if I knew what I was aiming for, I would get there in the end. And that's kind of what happened. Well, it's quite late now. I just couldn't resist, while I had Grandad's knife, I couldn't resist using that as a pattern and making a couple more. So now I've got one for myself as well. So I've made one for my Grandad, one for my mum, and one for me. There's quite a sweet little knife there, for which cost nothing in material terms, just quite a lot of time. So yeah, I certainly wouldn't make them to sell, but as a present, that's, you know, it's really good. He said modestly. What it means, it's good for me to make, as well as good to someone else when I give it to them. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Anyway, I'll stop banging on about it. I'm going to have some dinner. But I'm very happy with those. They turned out really well, I think. Thanks again for watching, and, you know, why not have a go? It really is an awful lot of fun.